The unending. In a world suddenly robbed of death's mercy, bodies become prisons of perpetual agony. I remember the moment it began, the day of the accident. Metal shrieked and glass exploded as our car careened off the bridge. I should have died on impact. Instead, I was thrown through the windshield, bones shattering as I hit the pavement. Through shattered ribs that pierced my lungs, I still breathed. My flesh was torn and mangled, yet my heart refused to stop. I lay twisted on broken limbs, fully conscious, and screaming as I watched blood pool beneath me, knowing I should be dead, but wasn't. They pulled me from the wreckage expecting a corpse, but found me alive and aware. In the hospital, the halls overflowed with the grotesque evidence of immortality. Burn victims with charred skin flaking off like blackened paper remained awake in unending pain. A construction worker, crushed under a collapsed wall, arrived as a sack of splintered bones, his spine severed, legs bent at impossible angles. Yet he blinked and whispered, feeling every misshapen bone knitting back together incorrectly. A man with a jagged shard of metal through his skull gurgled on the gurney. His eyes were cloudy and grey, one hanging loose from its socket. But he still saw, still felt everything. Nurses and doctors could only stare in horror as wounds festered without end. Antibiotics and bandages meant nothing. Infection spread in gangrenous blooms across living flesh that rotted but would not die. The stench of decay filled the ER. The sweet, sickening odor of organs slowly decomposing inside patients who screamed for relief that never came. On the streets, the dead walked or crawled. I saw a crowd gathered around a suicide jumper whose broken body twitched in a contorted heap. Every bone in his body shattered, limbs twisted around at unnatural angles. Yet he was alive, his lips mouthing silent cries, tears running down a face mashed from the impact. He would lie there for weeks, bones fusing in wrong positions, forever frozen in that awful pose. Others tried more desperate escapes. A woman slit her throat in despair, her blood poured out, but she remained staring at the sky, conscious as her voice gurgled through the crimson froth. Her wound eventually closed into a gruesome scar, denying her even that escape. People trapped in burning buildings were incinerated alive. Their skin melted to the muscle, eyes boiled white, and still their blackened husks writhed in the ashes, bodies refusing to shut down. Starvation victims with bellies distended and skin clinging to bone didn't die either. They simply lingered, each breath a shallow rattle, stomachs gnawing with hunger that would never kill them. Nerves kept firing, transmitting ceaseless pain from every injury, every infection, every hunger pang. We had entered a nightmare where flesh could fail in every horrific way, except granting us release. Days, then weeks, then months crawled by in interminable suffering. Time lost all meaning. I stopped counting the sunrises when I realized the sun itself had begun to stutter in the sky, sometimes freezing on the horizon or circling back east at noon. Whether it was the entity's reality-warping presence or my fractured mind, I do not know. My grasp on time and self was unraveling. In my endless agony, memory became a blur. I can barely remember who I was before. My name, my old life, the faces of loved ones, all fading, drowned under wave after wave of pain and trauma. The eternal torment gnaws not just at my body, but at my mind. I've learned that a mind can break in a million small ways without the mercy of oblivion. Each day I wake, if sleep even comes, into the same nightmare, and a little more of my sanity slips away. I talk to myself, reciting fragments of memories like mantras to remember I was once human. At times I laugh hysterically at nothing, other times I sob without tears. The body has none left to give. I've tried every form of coping, screaming until my throat shredded, striking my head against walls to knock myself out. It doesn't work. I only cracked my skull, and the pain got worse. I even tried to end it once, pressing a jagged piece of glass deep into my neck in a moment of despair. But of course it didn't end. I only added a new wound to my collection of scars. The hopelessness is a weight heavier than any physical injury. There is no escape, not in death, not in unconsciousness, not even in madness. I am forced to remain lucid, to fully feel every second of suffering that stretches out to eternity. Sometimes I fear that even if this horror were to last for centuries, I would continue, mind deteriorating into a hazy awareness, yet never blinking out. I wonder if there's a limit to how much horror a person can take before they simply stop being themselves. Perhaps I've already passed that point. I fear forgetting my own name, forgetting that I was ever anything but this raw nerve of pain. In rare lucid moments, I desperately cling to whatever fragments of identity I have left. A childhood memory of a summer sun, the lyrics of a favorite song, the way rain felt on my skin. But those memories are fading like old photographs, their colors bleeding out, overtaken by the all-consuming present anguish. Who am I? I ask the darkness, and the darkness does not answer. In this eternal night, despair is the only companion. I realize that suffering isn't just an experience now. It's all that exists, the core of my being in this deathless hell. As the unending days rolled on, the fabric of civilization frayed and tore. In the beginning, governments made panicked announcements urging calm, promising that scientists would find a cure for whatever affliction had seized the world. But how do you cure something that isn't a virus or poison, but a fundamental change in reality? Researchers and doctors could only watch in helpless dread as death itself had vacated the world. Hospitals became overflowing charnel houses of living corpses, and soon they turned away the afflicted, which was everyone. Emergency services faltered. What was the point of an ambulance when the injured never died, and the medics themselves were in agony from their own undying ailments? Within weeks, governments imploded under the weight of chaos. The rule of law disintegrated when it became clear that consequences had changed. No execution or battle or injury could end anyone. Armies still fought, but now wars became orgies of unlimited violence. Soldiers hacking each other apart knowing they wouldn't die, only suffer. Battlefields turned into mutilated landscapes of crawling torsos and limbless figures, screaming soldiers who kept fighting with knives clenched in what's left of their hands. There was no victory, only an eternity of carnage. Society's infrastructure crumbled quickly. Power grids failed as engineers stopped showing up to repair them. Some were trapped in substations, electrocuted alive yet unable to die as they burned. Others simply lost the will to continue working in a world that had gone mad. Food supply lines broke down. Famine swept the cities, but no one died of hunger. They just wasted away, desperate and feral. Mass riots and looting erupted everywhere. I witnessed mobs setting entire city blocks on fire in a twisted attempt at collective suicide, only to create hordes of burn-scarred, agonized survivors instead. We scarred the world trying to end our misery, and the scars became permanent because we lived on. In the absence of law and order, some people indulged their darkest impulses. Serial killers and sadists became like unstoppable predators. After all, their victims would survive every terrible act, and so would they. It was the purge of all purges, an endless night where even the concept of murder was obsolete. Those who tried to maintain their morality often fell victim to those who hadn't. Religions splintered under the weight of this nightmare. Some fervently believed this was divine punishment or a test of faith. I passed by a church where a congregation knelt in prayer even as their bodies decayed, faithful souls begging for a forgiveness or release that never came. In another town, a new cult arose, calling the phenomenon the blessing of eternal life. I watched in disgust and terror as its followers worshipped the horror, embracing pain as proof of divine presence. They conducted human sacrifices on altars, cutting out hearts and offering them to whatever god might listen. But their sacrifices never granted the peace of death. The victims only writhed on the altars, hearts still twitching in priests' hands, alive and suffering as the cult chanted praises to the unending God. Other sects sprang up in denial, insisting that death would return if only they performed the correct rituals or penance. Some people flagellated themselves in the streets or nailed themselves to crosses, hoping that extreme penance would move the heavens to end this curse. All they achieved were flayed backs and pierced limbs, adding to their torment. No deity answered, benevolent or malevolent, none intervened. Humanity fractured into desperate factions. There were survivalist groups who fortified enclaves, not to avoid death, which was impossible, but to hoard resources and avoid the roaming gangs of the insane. They formed their own twisted laws. In some enclaves, they'd dismember newcomers on sight, cutting off arms and legs to ensure they couldn't revolt. After all, they wouldn't die from it. They'd keep the limbless, defenseless torsos alive as servants or simply as cautionary examples. Other groups believed an ancient prophecy was at hand and sought out any law that might banish the horror. They collected forbidden texts, consulted self-proclaimed sorcerers, sacrificed virgins, anything for an end. But there was no end. Civilization had not just collapsed. It had been dragged into a new reality where pain and fear were the only currency. The streets were empty of life in the traditional sense. They were populated instead by shambling figures in various states of decay, and the air was filled with an eerie chorus of wails and sobs that never ceased. The world we knew was gone, replaced by this eternal charnel house, this broken planet where hope was the first thing to die, and the only thing that died at all. As if our plight wasn't horrific enough, the world kept changing, twisting under the influence of the cosmic force that held us in its grip. In time, new abominations emerged from the ranks of the undying. I first heard rumors in whispers, stories of the ever-hungry ones, people who had succumbed not just to despair, but to a vile, insatiable hunger that warped them into something inhuman. I did not believe it until I encountered one. It was night, or what passed for night under a sky that sometimes never fully darkened, when I heard a wet, rasping sound from the alleyway. A figure lunged at me, gaunt but unnaturally strong. Its skin was a patchwork of rot and fungus, stretched taut over elongated limbs. The face, God, that face will haunt me forever. The lower jaw had split at the chin into a grotesque gaping maw, hinged like a snake's jaws, lined with shards of broken teeth. The eyes were gone, replaced by two gaping holes that oozed black fluid, yet somehow it sensed my living flesh. This creature was once human, but now it was ruled entirely by hunger. It tackled me with inhuman strength, and its jaw distended impossibly wide. I felt those jagged teeth sink into my shoulder as it began to eat me alive. I screamed and fought, feeling my flesh tearing. In the tussle, my arm broke with a snap. But of course, that didn't stop me or give me the release of unconsciousness. With my good arm, I managed to stab the creature's neck with a shard of glass on the ground. Thick, dark blood, more like sludge, poured out, but the abomination didn't die. It merely hissed and recoiled, momentarily weakened. That gave me a chance to crawl away. Only later, hiding in a collapsed building, did I realize chunks of my own flesh were missing where it had feasted on me. The wounds throbbed with pain, but I could do nothing except watch them slowly close, healing just enough to keep me alive, as every injury does. I was lucky to escape. Many others did not. I have stumbled upon scenes that no sane mind can fully process. Victims absorbed into the very bodies of these mutants. In one deserted farmhouse, I found a bloated, misshapen thing fused to the wall, its flesh melding with wooden beams. As I approached, I saw multiple human faces pushing up beneath its stretched, translucent skin, their mouths opening and closing in silent agony. They were alive inside it. This monstrosity had absorbed them, maybe by consuming them piece by piece, and somehow their consciousness was now trapped in a shared flesh. When it sensed me, a dozen voices rose in unison from within that quivering mass, a howling chorus of suffering that sent me running, heart pounding, ears ringing with their screams. These grotesque amalgamations roam in search of sustenance, though their hunger can never be sated. I saw one of the ever-hungry later on, in the dim light of a burning oil drum that some survivors kept for warmth. The creature was once a woman, I think, but now her body had split open down the middle, and within her ribcage she carried the writhing body of another unfortunate soul half consumed. The victim's legs and torso dangled from her chest cavity, fused to her spine by ropes of viscera. His eyes looked at me, silently pleading, as her rib bones curled around him like the claws of a crab to hold him in place. It was still trying to chew what remained of his upper body with a mouth that had grown into a lamprey-like ring of teeth. Neither of them could die. They existed in a perpetual state of devourment. I fled, but I could not escape the sound that followed. The wet crunch of bone and the muffled moan of the man inside the other. The cosmic horror had not only stolen death from us, it had begun to mold us into new, terrible shapes. Some say that those who gave in to cannibalism or violence were rewarded with monstrous transformations, turning them into agents of greater suffering. Others believe the entity simply warps reality at random, and these mutations are the result, a mockery of evolution, creatures designed only to inflict and endure pain. Whatever the cause, the message was clear. In this world of endless life, there are fates far worse than death. We had become our own predators, our own hell. The victims consumed by these abominations remain conscious within them, experiencing every indescribable moment of being digested forever, yet never granted the release of death. I sometimes wonder if their minds eventually break and turn feral like their hosts, or if they remain human inside, screaming in silence for eternity. In this nightmare of mutation, even our souls feel devoured. In the midst of all this, it lurks, the source of our perpetual torment, vast, indifferent, and beyond our comprehension. We eventually gave the entity a name, the Unending. Not that it cares what we call it. Its presence is felt rather than seen, a distortion in reality, a wrongness that permeates everything. At times, the air shimmers with an oily iridescence, and the sky warps into impossible colors, as if light itself is afraid. I've seen physics defied casually in its wake, water flowing upward in a frozen cascade, time knots causing the same agonized scream to loop over and over in the same spot, footsteps that lead into nothing. Once, I walked along a highway and realized the distant landscape was repeating. I was seeing the same ruined farmhouse, the same dead oak tree every mile, like a broken record of reality. We are like insects caught in amber, while the amber slowly melts and reshapes around us. As the chaos unfolded, some claimed to have seen the Unending with their own eyes. A mad prophet in a tattered lab coat babbled that it was a cosmic entity of infinite size, that reality was merely its shadow. Others spoke of a great shape coiled beyond the veil of our world, glimpsed only as a silhouette against the stars. I cannot be sure what is real, but in fevered dreams, or perhaps visions, I myself have sensed something. An immense presence stretching across the cosmos, utterly alien. Not malevolent, not benevolent, it simply is. In one vision, I found myself floating in a void before a colossal mass of writhing darkness, like an abyss given form. Eyes, or what I took for eyes, studded its surface, each one a window opening onto different realities. In some I saw planets burning, in others I saw galaxies being born in silence. Its eyes did not register me. I was less than a mote of dust drifting by. From deep within that entity came a resonance, a droning hum that vibrated through my bones, a sound older than time, as if the universe itself was snoring in slumber. I awoke from that vision, gasping, back in my rotten body on the cold ground, knowing in my marrow that the unending was utterly indifferent to us. We are collateral, caught in the tide of a force as natural and as pitiless as gravity. This entity's arrival, if one can even call it arriving, shattered the order of existence on our planet. The laws of nature bend in its presence. Time coils and eddies. I've watched night fall and rise in reverse. Crows frozen in midair like black statues, unmoving for days, and then suddenly flapping away as if only a second had passed. I've seen my own injuries undo themselves and then re-inflict in a nauseating rewind-repeat cycle when I wandered too close to a place where reality was thin. It's as though our world is overlapping with something else, the physics of another dimension bleeding into ours. Some places have become zones of unreality, entire city blocks where gravity fluctuates and people float in agonized suspension, or forests where the trees bleed and whisper in languages that no human tongue can speak. These phenomena are neither punishment nor mercy. They're simply side effects, like radiation from a sun, emanating from the unending. And through it all, the entity remains oblivious. It did not come to save us, nor specifically to damn us. It is beyond such concepts. We rage at it, we plead with it. I have cursed the skies in every language and prayed in every way I remember, to gods old and new, and to the unending itself. Silence. The cosmic force does not answer. It churns at the edges of perception, perhaps dreaming, perhaps searching for something incomprehensible, while we ants scurry in eternal agony beneath it. That indifference is perhaps the greatest horror of all. Our suffering means nothing in the face of its vastness. We are not protagonists in a cosmic struggle, not victims of some villainous plan. We are simply there, like bacteria in a wound, writhing as the body around us goes through motions we can't fathom. The universe has broken in a fundamental way, and it will not be put back together. Not for us. I have no delusions of a happy ending. Whether the unending stays or eventually moves on, what's left of humanity will continue to endure this hell without end. If it ever departs and takes its gift, its curse, of immortality with it, then maybe finally we will all die. Perhaps in one merciful instant, every ragged soul will wink out and find peace. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it has changed us irrevocably, and even its absence won't release us. I cannot know. I only know that right now, as eternity yawns before us, all we have is dread. In the silence of the nights, broken only by distant screams, I sometimes hear that cosmic drone, the breathing of the unending, and I realize how small and powerless we truly are. We have been forsaken not by a vengeful God, but by the uncaring void. And so we continue, minds and bodies broken but unable to fall, trapped in the shadow of an indifferent horror. This is the world now, suffering without end, overseen by a vast cosmic force that simply does not care. Our existence has become a tale of inescapable dread, a nightmare that will never release its hold. Because in the unending, there is no death, and there is no escape, only the eternal scream of life that will not end.